The Braves infield was historically potent in 2021, and a big part of that production was Ozzie Albies. The second baseman is a topic du jour here on Battery Power as we continue our 2022 Stock Watch. I'm Cory McCartney, along with McAuley and Grant. A 30 home run, 40 double season, another 4-WAR season. 2021 was Ozzie Albies being Ozzie Albies, giving us a ton to like from the year that's behind us.
Yeah, there's a whole lot to like about Ozzie Albies' game overall because there's so many things he can do. He's a switch hitter. He's a good defender. He developed into a power hitter, which when he was signed, I don't think anybody would have expected. But yet here we are. And he has been one of the most impressive second basemen in baseball since bursting onto the scene some 4 seasons ago. But I do think that there is still room for Ozzie Albies to grow into an even bigger presence. And I say that with no pun intended whatsoever, because as you just pointed out, he just became the 3rd Braves second baseman to have a 30 home run season. So that's some pretty rare company in general. And I also tracked it back to a few other stats that are very impressive that we'll get into. But all of it has me feeling very good about his stock and his overall game and the places he can take it as we march into 2022. And, of course, the many years that he's signed to be with the Atlanta Braves.
He had a 107 weighted run created plus this past season, which all but equals his career average of 108. He had a 4.2 Fangraph WAR, just behind his career high of 4.5 from 2019. 77 extra base hits were one behind Bryce Harper for the National League lead. Underscores what's the biggest piece of Albies' game. Since his first season in 2017, no second baseman has more extra base hits than he does with 252. That's 2 more than Jose Altuve, despite Altuve having 250 more plate appearances than Albies has in that span. He's tied for 26th in all of baseball during that span in extra base hits. The 2020 season, an oddity for everybody, but especially Albies. He had 6 homers, a 0.6 WAR. The strikeout rate, walk rate were career worst. That was back to his normal numbers, though, in 2021. Add in a nearly 9% jump in hard hit rate and stats versus breaking balls and off-speed pitches that were just there with his 2019 highs. This was really, I think, 2021 was peak Albies at the plate for just so many different reasons.
Yeah, it really was. And we'll get into areas where he could improve and perhaps grow his game or maybe get on task or a little bit more on target with what he was showing us in 2019, when I feel like, to me, may have had a little bit better of an overall season. But that, of course, we can quibble with that or debate that on the internet. I think that's what social media was invented for. But you mentioned all these extra base hits. Ozzie Albies is the only second baseman in baseball history to have 75 or more extra base hits in his age 24 or younger season. That's all the second baseman in the history of baseball. That tells you he's in some pretty special company. You look at what he did last year with the 40 doubles, 30 homers, 100 runs batted in, and 20 steals. He and Alfonso Soriano, who did it twice, are the only guys to ever do that. Throw away the steals. Let's forget about those for a minute. 40 doubles, 30 homers, 100 runs batted in, 100 runs scored, which he also did. Rogers, Hornsby, Jeff Kent, Chase Utley, and that guy Soriano again. So when you talk about the company of Ozzie Albies and going into his age 25 season, you have to like what he's doing, even if there are some flaws in his game, and even if it has been a bit of a peaks and valleys season for him at times. And I think 2021 kind of underscored that. We saw him get as hot as he can get. We also saw him get as cold as he could get at times. I think if there's anything that he can do that will elevate that game, it's just finding some way to make it a little bit more consistent at the plate, because I got no qualms with what that guy does on the base paths or out there at second base.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about all those peaks for him and just how potent he was, but it wasn't all roses. I mean, he was a below average hitter in the second half of the season, had a 71 weighted run created plus in the postseason. Before he had 2 hits in game 6 of the World Series, he had all but disappeared in that series. He had a 598 OPS, 0 extra base hits in all in that round. I know we're nitpicking. I mean, his playoff production wasn't a hindrance, and he did go 2 for 3 with a walk in the clincher, scored on both the home runs from Jorge Soler and Dansby Swanson. But I feel like we know at this point who Ozzie Albies is and he's who he isn't. I mean, he's one of the best second basemen in the game, living in that 40 double, 25 home run plus range. And it's all but coming at this obscene value. I mean, a 7-year deal of $35 million. I mean, when you kind of paint that whole picture, it's hard to, I mean, you mentioned that there's room for growth, but it's also really hard to find fault with anything this guy's doing out in the field.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not about necessarily finding fault, but it is, I think, about trying to judge the performance as accurately and as best we can based on what I think some very general expectations would be, I think, for Albies and for the club, among others, because as he became, I think, a little bit of a liability at the plate at times in the second half, his spot in the batting order was not changing very often. He was still hitting at or near the top of the order, which was a little bit curious. It was especially curious in the postseason when that remained the same. And as you mentioned, in the World Series, he had his struggles. But I know that Brian Snitker is of the school of thinking, I've got enough moving parts as it is. I'm going to try to stick with what's working and who I believe is going to be able to produce, and hoping that this guy is going to come back around. And that is, whether you like it or not, part of managing players and part of managing a talent like an Ozzie Albies that can, on occasion, find himself in a slump that can be prolonged, as we found out in 2021, perhaps more so than any other time in his career. But again, I circle back to the immense talent, his ability to come up with big hits, his ability to drive in runs. I mean, this is a guy who became the second Brave second baseman to ever have a 100 RBI season, and the first one to do it since 1897. This has been, I think, an emergence of a hitter that you could not have expected Ozzie Albies to be, even if you were the most optimistic with your projections of him in the minor leagues. You might have thought, okay, this guy could rap out a bunch of hits, and maybe he'll become something of not a slap hitter, but he's going to have some doubles power. He's going to leg out some triples. He's going to steal bases. He's going to be that more prototypical middle infielder from perhaps a bygone era. He's anything but that. So the consistency is really going to be the biggest thing at the plate. It's approach. And we talked about this with Austin Riley quite a bit. Finding the consistency, I think, is going to be the key for Ozzie Albies breaking through. But what about the challenges, Corey, of being a switch hitter? You really have to mind two different sides of the plate and keep yourself in the right headspace and in the right physical space to feel like you're going up there as the most confident hitter you can be.
Yeah, and I've had this conversation with Albies before. He feels like he's a different hitter from one side of the plate to the other one. That's the struggle, right? Is being able to not feel like you're a different hitter from one side or the other one. And you know, when you still feel like that when you're a professional, I don't really know how you kind of get around that when you're still capable of doing things from both sides of the plate.
Yeah, and I'll never know how that feels. Obviously, I am well past what would be the peak of any career of an athletic endeavor, pretty much, save, I don't know, maybe bowling or something. But this is a guy who, as many times as I hear it throughout the year, when he does start to struggle from the left side, oh, I should just give up switch hitting. I've never once thought that that was the route to take, because I also don't think that his right-handed numbers thus far in his career would be sustainable if he starts facing right-handed pitchers from the right side of the plate. I think it might look a lot like it already looks, and I would hate to give up on something that I do believe is an overall credit to the lineup and a value to the club overall, and that's where I weigh in on his switch hitting. I don't think that's something that you're going to abandon. I don't see him abandoning something like that either. It's just going to be a constant work in progress, and really, if we're honing in on what he can do, I just saw a lot of non-competitive at-bats where it just felt like he had made up his mind. And that has nothing to do with, am I batting righty or am I batting lefty? That, I think, is just more of having a plan. That's, I think, what I've always been curious about. And again, I'm not a professional hitter. I don't even play one on television. But I didn't feel like he had a plan a lot of times. And that can be a hindrance to his ability to be the most valuable that he can be, especially hitting in one of the top 3 or 4 spots of the order.
Well, I think, there's also the sense of he knows what he's capable of doing, and he has that run production mode, that he wants to do that every time he comes up to the plate. We saw that in the postseason. It's almost like you feel like you're going to change everything, your entire, sense of your postseason in one swing. And we just know that that's not something that's capable of happening.
I feel like he just got a little bit too big sometimes with the swing, a little bit too big in what he wanted to do and one at bat. It's if he's dealing with say a 1 for 15 or a 2 for 20 slump, it's like he wants to get back those other 10 or 18 at bats that didn't go well for him with one swing of the bat. And I don't blame him, because this is a guy that has shown he can do it when you're averaging or when you're cranking out 20 plus homers a year, 40 plus doubles a year, 30 homers for the first time in your career. You might get tempted to get a little bit bigger. And I think that he has at times with the swing. I mean, and that could be part of what this is, but an improvement in his on-base skills, even getting back to that level that he was in 2019, where he had a 350 plus on-base percentage. That I would feel like would be the low bar for Ozzie Albies, because I think he's a guy that can approach that 375, 380 or higher on-base percentage. But at the plate, there has to be a little bit more of a plan sometimes. If that was to be the nitpicking that I do, it's just a little bit more of knowing exactly what all of the outcomes can be, rather than looking for one of the outcomes, which I feel like was happening at times last year. And it was kind of obvious even from watching from home.
Well, he continues to be a key foundational piece for this Braves team, and will look to defend that World Series championship in 2022 with Ozzie Albies playing a major part. We are far, by the way, done from our look back and forward with the Braves in the Stock Watch series. So you can check out all the episodes on the Talking Chop YouTube page. And while you're at it, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an alert for every single new episode. As always, thanks for watching. I'm Cory McCartney. He's Grant McAuley, and we'll see you in next time, Braves Country.